sort of scripted here because I want to remain on message. So, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You have heard these words many times, and those radical words, of course, are found in the Declaration of Independence as they were penned by Thomas Jefferson, our third president. It was written in recognition that we are accountable to God, and it stated unequivocally, our freedoms were extended to us from the hand of God Almighty, not by government. Our Constitution, pledge, and our Bill of Rights reaffirmed this truth. Our rights were inalienable, that these freedoms were absolute and undisputable. They were indivisible, that they could not be divided or reduced. They were universal, that they belonged to all men, and that they were interdependent. That is to say, each freedom was sustained by the other freedom. Other nations gasped as the founders of the new nation had the naivete to declare, we believe in the potential of the individual. We rather take our chances with an individual's potential to create, innovate, and generate prosperity before we would give that essential responsibility to any crown, feudal lord, or estate. And they were absolutely right to do so. And while it is true that the bold American experiment was tempered by the vicissitudes of history, a bloody civil war that almost ripped the young nation asunder, an epic depression, and triumphant battles over fascist and Nazi statist powers, through it all, free Americans produced more opportunities for more people than any other single nation in history. Additionally, discoveries, our innovations and inventions changed the world in ways never imagined, too numerous to list. Our medical and scientific advances have saved and continue to save millions throughout the world. Our bounty of wealth has doubled lifespans, reduced infant mortality rates tenfold, made our environment cleaner, lifted more people out of poverty, and advanced more people up the income scale than any other system known to man. My own parents came to America long ago with a dream that they could do here what they could not do in their country of origin. Woody Guthrie pretty much summed up the sentiment in a song. They came to the mountaintop, and it looked like the promised land, a rich green valley with a river running through it. There was work for every single hand, they thought. There was work for every single hand. I was born in Central California after the grape season of '68, and I was then raised in the Yakima Valley of Washington State. Growing up a farm worker was the best of times, and it was the worst of times, and some of you can sympathize with me on what that means. After about 20 years of following the crop seasons through the states of Nebraska, California, and Washington State, my parents took their savings and risked it all on a small hotel. Mom and Dad worked hard to improve their purchase by revamping the exterior and revamping the interiors, modernizing the technology in order to increase customer traffic. Dad sold it for several years ago for almost $500,000, 5 times the amount of their initial investment. It was enough for them to retire securely. The lesson was clear. Only through free enterprise and the accumulation of capital was he able to achieve his dream. My parents chose independence, and it made all the difference. Their hard work made it possible for their son to go from the fields to the White House. Only in America, like they say. And many more succeeded in just a short time after coming to America. But many others, regrettably, traded in their independence. Many who were held by well-intentioned government safety nets became ensnared, parlaying the temporary aid into a lifestyle. Unintentionally, they condemned themselves and their children to a lifestyle of mediocrity proffered by cradle-to-the-grave government assistance programs. We now learn from a recent report that there is a record number of Hispanic children living under the poverty level, and that for the first time there are more Hispanic children living in poverty than the total number of white children in poverty. Now, that's incredible because 60% of America is made up by white folks, 16% is made up by Hispanics, and yet the sheer number of Hispanic children surpass those of white children. How can this be when we have poured an unprecedented amount of tax dollars into public assistance and anti-poverty programs? Well, if it's true that when you subsidize something, you get more of it, is it any wonder we got more poverty? When will we say enough? When will we have an honest conversation about the ills of government dependence and how it is destroying the Hispanic family? Did you know that half of all Hispanic children today are born out of wedlock? The fact is, since the New Deal, Americans have been seeing a steady increase in the size and scope of government in their lives. We are so overloaded with taxation, burdensome regulations, wasteful government programs, and profligate borrowing and spending that trillion-dollar deficits have become the norm in America. To be clear, politically driven subsidies, legislative exemptions sold to the highest bidder, crony capitalism, and a long list of brazen congressional earmarks have come from both parties. The Fraser Institute's recently released Economic Freedom of the World 2011 report indicates that the United States has fallen from 6th place to 10th place in the freedom ranking that measures 41 data points in 140 countries around the world. China and Singapore lead the list. And our friend here was talking about how the growth is being spurred by these countries. Solutions to the economic problems facing America and Hispanics in particular have not been found in restricting free markets, redistributionist policies, or limiting the creation of private wealth. These approaches have put our economic future in peril and discouraged essential risk-taking. Entrepreneurs won't innovate, create, and capital investment has been disappearing. Growth has been lackluster. Research and production has declined and opportunities have diminished. In giving up American individualism to gain economic security, we have wound up with neither. Mort Zuckerman writes that there are currently over 14 million people unemployed in America. We now have more idle men and women than at any time since the Great Depression. Nearly 7 people in the labor pool compete for every job opening. When economic systems break down due to the imposition of government, as they are now unraveling in some European welfare states, those who will be the first and hardest will be, in fact, the poor who will suffer the most. The working family living from paycheck to paycheck, the pensioner, those operating at the margins. If we fail to come to grips with the reality of our potentially ruinous fiscal trajectory, we will all learn, as other countries are now learning, what truly vulnerable means. If people today suffer from poverty, it is not the result of the free market. It is because something in their life has caused them not to have access to free market opportunities. People who blame capitalism for the poverty in the world haven't studied, or at least ignore history. Poverty is nothing new. Poverty has always been the fate of mankind. 200 years ago, every country was an underdeveloped country. The new thing in the world, the fantastic thing that demands an explanation, is wealth. The fact that some countries and regions have been lifted out of poverty for the first time in the world's history is a miracle to behold. We must release it, not choke it. But that's what happens when the government raises the money it spends by borrowing savings or excessively taxing its citizens. It transfers spending power from private owners to political spenders in power. This creates no new wealth. With less money in their pockets and bank accounts, private individuals and corporations and small businesses must reduce the amounts they spend or invest. They are forced to buy fewer goods and employ fewer workers. We have overburdened the economy. We have overestimated the power of government to do more and more for more and more people, to reshape the economy and society according to fallible human design, when individual human action is what is needed. There is a better way. We envision a prosperous Hispanic and Latino community contributing directly to building a renewed and free American economy. We have launched the LIBRE initiative to build broad public support to increase economic freedom and prosperity by promoting free enterprise, self-reliance, and limiting the size and scope of government. Emiliano Zapata called it tierra y libertad. El cubano José Martí famously said, "Es la libertad la esencia de la vida." Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death." They were fighting for the same things back then that we must fight for today: private property and freedom. Emiliano was fighting for the lands that were confiscated by government and rich caciques. We must return to the principles of economic freedom embodied in the rule of law, the protection of property rights and freedom of contract, openness of competition, sound money, and government serving as an umpire. Smaller, smarter government that respects an individual's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It always comes back to that same radical idea, the potential of a free individual to create, to innovate, and pursue his own interests. The thing is, when man is left alone to pursue his own interests, he cannot achieve it without first improving the life of his neighbor, and thus society. If one has accumulated wealth, generally it is because that person has served to enrich society through his innovation, creation of new and better products, or his higher level of service that was rewarded by the consumer. In creating wealth, that person has also generated jobs, economic opportunities, and in many cases, sustained the economy of entire communities, such as Microsoft, Apple, Nike, and other great American brands. And we know that no one generates more jobs than small businesses in America. The virtue in our system is that firms cannot long exist without a reputation for honesty, quality, workmanship, and in most cases, courteous service. Most importantly, as Hector's father and my father's story point out, it is only through the accumulation and sufficiency of capital that we strengthen our individual condition, the family unit, and create opportunities to propagate endless charitable, cultural, and socially related activity. Today, more than any other day, the principles of freedom must be passed on from generation to generation. President Ronald Reagan warned, it all comes down to the basic premise. If you lose economic freedom, you lose political freedom, and in fact, all freedom. Freedom is something that cannot be passed genetically. It is never more than one generation away from extinction. Every generation has to learn how to protect and defend it. Once freedom is gone, it's gone for a long, long time. And already too many of us, particularly those in business and industry, have chosen to switch rather than fight. Will we allow free enterprise to die because it lacks defenders? Robert F. Kennedy said, government, by the consent of the people, must be limited in its power to act against its people, so that there is no interference with the right to worship, no restriction for any man to become educated or seek opportunity to gain wealth and fortune. Denial of freedom will be fought against by the American electorate, for freedom is in our blood, it's in our heritage, and it is in our destiny. And I couldn't agree with him more. The United States of America, more than ever before in our history since the founding, needs its people to rally in defense of liberty, self-reliance, individualism, and the real concept of America as sectionalism. I will conclude by adding the long and short of it. You are the answer. You are the solution. The entrepreneur, the dreamer, the risk taker. You have been the hero, the one who made America the most prosperous nation known to man. We defend you. We applaud you, and we want more of you, not less. We seek more freedom, not less. We seek more capitalism, not less. And we want more free enterprise, not less. We don't seek temporary legislative gimmicks, but sustainable and durable jobs that create wealth, that provide gainful employment, upward mobility, and expanded economic opportunity for all Americans. The LIBRE initiative, alongside with the Latino Coalition, seeks to contribute aggressively in that effort on a national scale. The effort to expand the conversation within our community about the virtues of economic freedom and limited government. You will hear more about our group and our efforts in coming months as we launch our website, deploy our people, and announce our partnerships, and we look forward to working with the Latino Coalition. I hope you will join me. Thank you.